Okay. And then,
Live on YouTube. I like that.
yeah. And here we go. And then we're going to record to the cloud here. And okay, we're good. Okay, so hey, it's Bill Gross.
Live on YouTube. I like that.
Oops, you're making noise.
Yeah.
I got the recording on the other end there. Hey, it's Bill Gross here, the LAProbate and I have with us. I'm really excited to have a repeat performance backed by special demand. We had him on our probate call, and I decided to have a little one-on-one chat with a good friend, attorney from the Sunshine State of Florida, Al Nicolletti. Al, welcome.
Bill, thank you so much for having me.
It's my pleasure. So, so Al, I saw you, I think, on a conference call with a probate data source a while ago. And I work with attorneys all the time, and not most of them aren't as entertaining as you are. So the first question I have is, do you do speaking regularly? Is this part of your attorney business development business? Is this just something you enjoy doing, or just legitimately something you do to build your business?
I'd say a culmination of all the three, right? So I know what I'm kind of doing when I do these speaking things, and it kind of started last year. I moved from Miami to Jacksonville. Great opportunity came here. And I realized I wanted, let's find business. So, you go around shaking hands and doing your thing, and you realize that it's not just enough. And so I started doing teaching courses. I started actually like looking up some stuff, put a PowerPoint together, and I started going to the real estate associations. And as soon as I started doing those, I really felt like I had more of the knack for speaking. I have a music background, so that probably helped my
Uh,
performance. Yeah, that's where this whole entertainment comes from, right?
got it. Got it.
The improv, the left brain thing.
Well, the reason I say that is, I've listened to a lot of attorneys. For my training, I want to hear how they do probate and trust, and we'll talk about some of those topics. But you talked about it not like an attorney teaching me how to file a petition for confirmation of sale, but you talked to me as a real estate investor trying to help me get my commission check or get my client the house to get the house sold. And that only comes from working with investors and the like. You must spend time with real estate investors regularly.
Oh yeah, I love it. I mean, the investors are really savvy. They're entrepreneurs, so they're really good about knowing how to find deals. And something that I do in my video podcast now is how deals can find you. So not so much going after it, but making sure that you stay consistent, focused. But yeah, the community here, especially in Florida, is amazing for investors, amazing for real estate. And so when everybody comes together, whether it's title, probate attorney, quiet title, doing things like that. Everybody kind of works together to figure out a solution. And that's why I'm really part of being the solution, not a problem. So I love that aspect of real estate is people coming together and building something.
Now, for my Los Angeles people, in most states, when they say title, they mean really title and what we call escrow combined. Here in LA, we usually have two functions. We have the escrow that does what attorneys do in most states: hold the title of the property, hold the money, exchange them at the end. And the title company clears the title, and you have them in one piece, and we do it in two. So let me ask you about that. What's the variance of what you would call title officers from the good ones, the bad ones? Do you see as wide a disparity in the business as I see?
Um, I do only on the fact of customer service, right? So title, I don't do title, I don't do anything related to it. The closest thing I come to title is like doing the probate, which helps title. But working with title companies, it's a lot about customer service, treating everybody, responding to phone calls, responding to emails, responding to lawyers, and of course, development of the company, of the title company. And it's really important that when a deal is messy, title companies kind of they work with you, right? They're working to solve a problem. So I would have to say on a title end, yes, choosing the right title company, of course, can make or break the deal. But here in Florida, I think what happens is so many title companies get so consumed with getting so much volume that they forget the importance of getting the deal done. Like,
Yeah.
for example, I had a probate that we did in Fort Myers. I got the probate referred to me back in like July or June. Well, long story short, we didn't need to do the formal or the ancillary administration from Arizona. We did the probate. We got it done like the first week of September. And here we are today. It's October 15th, and we still aren't closed. And so a lot of that has to do with knowing how to move the files and being in communication with either the probate attorney, the seller, the buyer. And I think title is just very underestimated when it comes to a deal because yeah, I the investors, they get it. You know, you can get under contract, you get the seller, great, but it's not even about that anymore, right? It's about what's coming up that's preventing the deal and preventing the equity.
So, well, you said a lot there, a lot to unpack. One of the things that I liked about talking to you is 90% of the time, an attorney on a case I work with only does one or two probates a year, maybe if that many, right? That so often customers turn to the family attorney, and the family attorney goes, "Yeah, I'm licensed to do a probate," and they do a probate, and they really know nothing about the process. You must deal with those kinds of attorneys in your practice from time to time, right? And the challenge is they're smart people, they're legitimate, they're licensed attorneys, they're legitimate people. But how do you tactfully tell them, with all respect, you have no idea what you're talking about? How do you handle that conversation?
I don't know if I say that to them directly, but I let their work speak for themselves. I guess, you know, people have caught on really quickly. You say maybe some attorneys do 1 to 2 probates a year. I think it's October. I've done about 90 this year
Woo,
alone. 90.
woo.
And they've been double triples, because what happens is you'll get one and then you'll find out, oh, there's brother, sister. Well, where's brother? Oh, he's dead too. So then you need a second probate. So it's like multiple levels. You just have to let the work speak for itself, because the whole probate game is just given a bad name because of how long some of the probates take. I don't know what it's like in California, but people here, before I really started getting more popular, I think when I started first doing the education probate seminar, I tell people, oh yeah, we could do it in 2 to 4 days. And they'd be like, 2 to 4 days. The last one I had was like 2 years, like 9 months. And I'm like, what planet are you on? And it's
California.
California planet. Yeah. And it's been really difficult. Actually, I take that back. Lately, it's not difficult. Everybody's catching on because of the work I'm doing. But it was difficult in the beginning to really explain that it doesn't take forever and you don't have to do all of that whole executor, personal representative, and you don't have to know all of these words. And I think I kind of touched on that in the webinar, that you don't have to know all of that stuff. So in terms of going to the right people, knowing the right things, when you start hearing 1 year, 2 years, especially in Florida, um, run for the hills?
Well, that's
Question mark.
Florida. That's Florida. Because I got to tell you, in California, I have a spreadsheet with every case in California, in LA County. I can speak about LA County. Every case, its file date and its final accounting. There are none less than 14 months scheduled right now. They just don't happen that fast. I mean, nothing happens that fast. Like, I had a question today. Somebody, I refer, some clients come to me, they try pro per, they get into a pickle. They don't really need an attorney, they need some paralegal help. And so, as a service, I refer them to occasionally. And somebody said to me, well, the service you're referring me to, have you closed a deal with them? Now, I only started working with them about 6 months ago. In my mind, yeah, because several deals, they got to sale and we sold the property and I'm done. But I thought about it, yeah, but the escrow was done. That thing's probably got another 6 months to go. Like,
Right.
nothing closes. If we sold the house, they still have 6 months of accounting and the filing, the objections to the accounting, the nitpicking, rescheduling. That's California. So Florida's a little different. And it's one of the things to caution everybody is every state's different. Find an expert in your state.
Yeah, and the majority of probates here in Florida, Bill, don't require that extensive amount of probate work. All of that inventory accountings, that's not required for things like simple summaries, or I wouldn't call them simple because every time you think it's a simple probate, it's not simple, but you find out what's really going on. But the value of the estate is of a certain value, so you can move things a lot quicker. And people, I had a investor or realtor after the webinar email me. They said, we watched the presentation. I have a timeline that I like giving clients, and take a look at it. Well, I looked at the timeline and I was like, holy moly. It said, like, 3 months before we get the petitions officially done, another 6 months before the property goes before the court, 2 years by the time we do final accounting. And you don't need to know all of that. That's the problem. And it doesn't, I mean, in California, maybe it goes all the way that long, but in Florida, no way. I mean, if it's a simple homestead property, mom lived there, died, and there was 2 kids, and that's it. Why? You don't have to go through this whole a big formal petition for executor, PR. I mean, it's ridiculous, Bill. And people still have that in their mind because of all the books out there that go through all of that stuff, state by state. It's crazy.
Yeah, I share with you, it used to be pre-COVID when we had a sale at court, a confirmation sale court. So the attorney would prepare an order for the judge to sign. Now, most of them didn't know they could prepare the order ahead of time because 9% of the time the sale gets confirmed as is. So it's all should be done. Just sign it and turn it in on the spot. And we would get it back from the judge a week to 3 weeks later, but we didn't get it back. We got back and he would sign the original, be filed. Then we had to go downstairs to the first floor to get a certified copy, certified original. And that would cost $50. Now, he was in the court. He approved the sale verbally. There's a minute order that day posted online. We had to wait for the order to get signed. And I get there's some details in the order, but then we need an actual wet certified copy. And so executors or attorneys would ask for 3 or 4 copies, one for this bank, one for that bank. And the whole thing would wait around. And I, as a service, would go and get those copies. So COVID comes around and the Superior Court judge just says, you know what? No more originals. It's all online. If you can't check it for yourself, you're an idiot, basically is what he says. And I'm thinking, why have we done that for 10 years? All of a sudden, this very important process that took weeks and lots of money, all of a sudden California's court goes, you know what? We don't really need that. What do you mean you don't need that? We've been killing ourselves for that all this time. So it's amazing how COVID has squeezed out some of the fat from the process. Do you see that in Florida as well?
Yeah, and I got some ideas, one of which was hearings, right? So for a while, hearings, we would have to go in person just to set a trial, right? 5-minute hearing, maybe it ends up being really 2,
Right.
because everybody agrees to everything because we're standing outside the courthouse and going, what do you think for this day? Who do you like for a mediator? Are we good for this? I mean, for 5 minutes for an hour and a half drive back and forth. And then I'm in the office by 11 o'clock. I got lunch at 12. I mean, it's crazy. So now we're doing Zoom hearings online. I can be home all of a sudden at 9 a.m. I jump on, the judge is there. We're talking, we're having a good time from the computer. And then I'm back to doing what I'm doing. And the second thing that has been amazing is basically, like you said, why all of a sudden has the COVID thing changed the way that documents and receipt of documents for probate and whatnot? For example, the major counties in Florida, like Tampa, Orlando, Jacksonville adapted really well. I mean, very, very well when it came to probate. It was very impressive. But the smaller counties like Fort Myers and Charlotte County, before, they were doing a lot of things by mail-in, and they were still doing things for mail-in
Yes.
back in September.
Yes.
And because of COVID, they now have adopted themselves to the e-filing portal, which
Yeah.
Jacksonville does, Tampa does a great job, Orlando. So it forced the small counties in Florida that
Yeah.
you would have to, they probably hold tax deed auctions in person, but not anymore, right? So they forced themselves to now be online. So convenient.
Yeah. Yeah. It's amazing how, look, I have to give credit to our LA Superior Court judge. When I saw, when they closed the court down, I saw his name, I went online, saw his bio. I figure it's a political position. And, politicians, they can just be bureaucrat. But when I read his first order on the court closing with all the details he had to cover, and then they had a video, and I saw this guy explain what he was doing. Like, oh my gosh, this guy is like a genius. Like he's running a whole LA Superior Court system like a master puppeteer. And they've made a lot of changes, but you really have to ask yourself, why do we wait so long to make some of these changes? Appearances being one of them. I would go to court every day, and half the matters were what were called either RFA, recommend for approval, or DWP, deny without prejudice, where both parties agreed to deny something online. And so out of 40 matters, 10 or 15 would just go away unless somebody showed up that day. It just seemed like, but you made people show up to in case somebody came to object, the attorney would have to show up or call in a court call. It was just really, this is what forced our hand to get more efficient, which is, I think, in the long run, hopefully a good thing.
I interviewed an investor this morning that focused all of their real estate investing in Miami, Broward, and West Palm Beach. And I asked him the question. I said, how has COVID really changed your business? And he said, because it's now forced me to look at other markets in Orlando, Tampa, Jacksonville, the Panhandle, that he said he never looked at before.
Right.
And it's like it opened up the blinders, and he's got a Facebook group. He's doing things virtually now, things that people really wouldn't have done before. So yeah, I mean, Bill, I mean, you see it with real estate. I mean, you have to be doing a lot more things virtually.
Yes.
I mean, have you done a listing or looked to buy a piece of property and just done it virtually? You haven't even looked at the property physically?
I tell you, I've closed in the last 6 months. I have a bunch of closing the next week. So by the end of the month, I've closed 20 transactions during COVID. I've only been to one. Like,
wow.
Now, some of it I found other people to do it. There's younger people who are more comfortable going to houses or showing houses, or whatever. But customers are perfectly fine with, hey, I found this is the house you're looking for, and the other agent will meet you there. Are you okay with that? They're fine with that. So I don't need to go. So I don't have to drive to the valley, which is 45 minutes each way, and and then online, everybody does online documents now. It's funny. 6 months ago, customers would say, "Well, I'm not really comfortable doing things online." Now everybody, no problem. Even the older 70-year-old people, yeah, email me. I use DocuSign, Digital Ink, whichever one you use. Like, wow, that's great. So I tell people, and I've expanded my geography. When I was pre-COVID, I was just LA County. Now I added during COVID 17 people to my team. I cover now Orange, San Bernardino, Riverside. I have a guy I'm working on in Florida, down in Miami. So stay tuned. Once I get him, then Florida kind of opens up for me. I've got a guy in Kansas. So yeah, I think the COVID has forced us all online and create opportunities for those who are working hard. I've never worked harder than the last 6 months, but I've never made the money I've made in terms of wealth in the last 6 months. And a lot of it's because of COVID. It's really pushed me to push past my barriers.
Did you have any roller coaster moments during COVID?
The day March 17th was the day they closed the court. It was a Wednesday. And I had that day like 20 pending escrows that need court confirmation. And meaning from that day forward that we're now on hold.
Right.
And I imagined they're all going to cancel. And in fact, they did all cancel and then resold. But that day, I remember coming home, sitting right at this desk. I put my head down and cried. And I said, what the hell am I going to do? I've worked so hard for the last year to build this business up. Everything is rolling. I kept a positive attitude, and it's all stopped. And I actually watched a webinar by like a motivational speaker, And I stopped. I spent an hour and I made a list of, I cut every expense. I turned everything off. Everything was spent. I said to my wife, we're not spending a penny. Just figure it out. Buy groceries. We're not eating out anywhere. Just figure it out. We stopped everything. And I made a list of how I could generate revenue. And I spent about a day or two working on a plan. And I have to tell you, from that day, it was hard getting started, but it was very depressing that first day. I also worried about my health, being older. I've always been overweight. Working on my house all day, I would just be in the kitchen and balloon. I'm actually 10 pounds less than when COVID started. But
Wow.
yeah, so when you say roller coaster, for me, I was so depressed on that one day. And literally was right here at this desk. I just put my head down and sobbed like a baby. And then I just said, well, you better figure this out somehow, buddy. And I have to tell you, I've been locked in ever since. I've been completely locked in.
Wow. Talk about having a moment that changes your life. And COVID, I feel like just changed everybody's perspective on business personally.
Yeah.
I mean, there were some people that said that it really changed their perspective about themselves and what they learned, not being so extroverted and talking to people and like being more into what their world is, and learning more about themselves, being in tuned to their inner emotions. So that's great content there, Bill.
I coach salespeople every day, and I pre-COVID used to say most people live quiet, desperate, lonely lives. I've said that a million times in the last 20 years coaching. During COVID, it's even more so because we have less chance to interact with humans. And I realized one of the things I realized as I was, reflecting on my business was the increased importance of personal connection where we could. And so that day I got a Zoom account and started learning how to make Zoom work. And I learned how to host meetings and record them and to stream them and to this. And I played around with the fancy backgrounds when that was a new thing. Now I don't play with them anymore. It's just not so cool or so important. But my point is, from day one, I just jumped on the Zoom technology. I jumped on the phone and called everybody I knew just to say, what are you doing? How are you doing? Do you need anything? How can I help? And I think that my sales business has really been about helping people. And probate for me is all about helping people, because I found a lady who was like, she's a drug addict, and
Mm-hmm.
her mother died, and she's living in squalor, and her brother and she co-own this house that neither would get their act together to sell it and get the probate going. And I referred her to a company, got her a little bit of money, paid for the attorney's fees, got it filed, got the house sold, got her cleaned up a little bit, and gives her a chance to move forward financially. So, I do agree with you that this has been a chance for all of us to reflect. And I think for most people, the solution has to be pay more attention to other people than just yourself. Right. And I think in probate real estate in particular, we have that opportunity to do that on a daily basis.
It's really funny, Bill. So this morning I had a podcast interview with an investor, and on my list of what we were going to talk about, the word probate was not anywhere on it. And it was funny how at the end, or close to the end, I asked something about like, what do you find really fruitful in real estate? And he said, probate. And it was funny because it was like we weren't expecting to talk about that, and we went right into it. I guess tell us about what your experiences have been with probate. Like, I'd love to hear how you've seen it on your end, because investors here, once they see the work I've done, it's just a different game. It's in and out. But in California, I mean, it's a completely different ball game.
Well, I think that, probate's a big topic, right? It covers a lot of different areas. So when you say to me probate, I don't think of it specifically as just the legal aspect of a probate. But I think of probates, conservatorships, trusts, litigation, attorneys, quiet title, partition actions, because I would meet attorneys in a probate court that handle those things. I got involved with those things. So to me, it's all kind of the same. And I would call it all really legal real estate is really what I focus on. And so I think that many people, it's so funny, when I teach real estate agents or investors how to build a probate business, they'll say, well, I make all these phone calls and most people don't answer the phone. And the ones that do, most of them aren't interested in selling. And I said, right. I said, it's like you bought a diamond mine and you're complaining about the dirt. Your job is to remove the dirt and take out the diamonds. That's how $1 billion is made in diamonds, right?
Right.
And so I think in real estate that sometimes I think of probate more as I'm looking for people with real estate problems to solve the problem. Because if I can find somebody with a problem they think they can't solve and I help them solve it, I get paid. That's how it works. So sometimes the problem is probate. Sometimes the problem is legal. Sometimes it's just emotional. I had a guy on my probate call the other day who called me after about listing property, and really he just was so emotional about the property that he couldn't. It was a trust, so there's no probate involved. It's already been passed and he has authority to sell it, but he needed somebody to tell him it's okay to sell it as is. You don't have to rehab it. You don't have to get top dollar and spend another 6 months and another $50,000 you don't have. You can sell it as is. That's a smart decision in your case. But I listened to him for a while. I gave him the emotional support. That was his problem. His problem was just all emotional and nothing to do with the law. And so you could say, is that a probate listing? No, I got it by prospecting for probate. I opened the conversation because of my expertise in probate. But in reality, that was just a real estate deal where he had a problem and his problem wasn't even legal. It was just emotional. And so to answer your question, I think I would say that the investors I know that make money, they make it by finding people who have problems and solving the problem. Sometimes the problem is cash. Sometimes it's a loan. Sometimes it's legal. Sometimes it's getting tenants out of a property. Sometimes it's fixing up a property. It can be a lot of things. But whatever it is, the seller doesn't think they can solve the problem. And if you help them as an agent, I get paid. That's how I look at it.
Have you noticed in yourself that I think there's a wide range of types of investors, but I've kind of pinned it down to two. Investors or agents that want the short-term version of the real estate. They want to get the deal, get it closed, done. And then I run into investors that are like, take your time, 6-8 months. I was on a deal for 2 years and I waited that long. Where do you kind of stand with all that? Because you know the terms partition, you know quiet title, you know those words. So like, are you the guy that's in it for the long game, or do you also have a side to you? You want that bread and butter short game?
So I'd say this, that the profit's in the long game, right? If this is a career for you, I have to make money every month to pay for my family and support and build our retirement and the things we want to do. So, but I'm making money this month from things I did 6 months ago, a year ago, 2 years ago, not necessarily I did last week. Now, in my business, probate, some of them, when they average a year and a half, 2 years, I don't necessarily want all my business out that long. Like right now, because the probate has lengthened because of COVID, on the front end, the petition is 3 months longer and the sale of the property is 3 months longer. Well, not 6 months longer. So my return is maybe another 6 months. For that work, I'm gonna put more of my attention on some shorter term business, a little bit to balance it out a bit. But I do think you make a good point, which is that if you make your career on the long-term business, and then you can fill in and raise your income with a shorter term business. And so for me, I think investors to court to buy overbids, that's shorter term business, right? You show up, you buy it, you close in 10 to 30 days. That's great. Smaller amounts, but faster money.
Right.
And try to balance it out. As an investor, personally, I'm not a landlord. If I buy something, I just want to clean it out, maybe paint it and resell it. So anything that's longer than that, rehabs I would take to a client. But legal stuff, I love quiet title. I love partition. We got, in probate, we get partition causes regularly where two parties in a probate court, they only sell half. And you can usually buy that half for 60 to 70% of the fair market value. And then either work a deal with the other party when they realize you're not going away, or hire an attorney and do a partition action for $10,000, $20,000. And to me, that's like the easiest money in the world. And the attorney loves it. I got to tell you, the one attorney of my whole Rolodex who returns my phone call is the partition guy, because he gets paid. It's easy money. He likes it. He keeps asking me for more investments. He wants me to bring in the deal as investor. And I did the same thing with sheriff sales. Same thing. Sheriff sales can be a very sticky legal position as well. So I found investors who are attorneys who like that work. They look at it as they're hiring themselves to do the legal work, and then they factor that cost in, still need to make a profit. So to answer your question, my bread and butter business is the longer term stuff, and then I try to fill in with some short term stuff to get some income.
Very, very fascinating, Bill, because I think a lot of people are always still trying to find their way. And so it's funny when I talk to one investor that watches one of the shows, investor shows, and is like, I really want any deals that are falling through that you don't want to wait for. I want them. Or like, then you'll see guys that'll say, well, we want the quick deals, the fast deals. Also, while I have you, because this is great content for partitions, and it's something I've really been trying to educate more and more about. It sounds like it's not a whole lot different than Florida. Ex-husband, ex-wife, property wasn't contemplated in the judgment because divorce lawyer, forgot. And then ex-husband wants to sell, ex-wife does not. He can force the sale and get a judgment, go to a private or public auction. Or heirs don't agree, and 4 of them are on title. 2 want to sell, 2 don't. 3 want to sell, 1 doesn't. Whatever combination you got. But then the important part that you talked about, which is something I've been more vocal about, is that almost that fractional ownership interest. Talk to us a little bit more about that, because it sounds like it's no different than California.
So when you say fractional, I've only been involved in as an investor or an agent at 50%, right? So it's a classic husband-wife, prior marriage, kept it separate, and the surviving spouse doesn't inherit, but maybe some other kid does or something else. And so, or I had one where he had half in a trust, half not in a trust. I don't know why. And so you have to probate the half that's not in the trust. And they sell the probate. And I think what often happens, so I'll tell you the real story. The real story in these is this. The party that has the half thinks they're going to get it on the cheap. Nobody else really even bids on these properties. They will. So the one case that we had was the property's worth $1 million. So half the property, let's say, is worth fair market value about $500,000. And so the guy who has the half, he offers to buy the other half for, say, $300,000. You can't get a loan for that. There's nobody who'll lend on that. I mean, I called around. Of course, a neighbor or friend, but there's no institution, there's no lender, there's no hard money lender. So we went in and bought it. The court overbid minimum was 316 or something, 315, 100, something small like that. So we buy it for 315 and change. And now we have half and he has half. Interesting story. When it came to close, this guy, because he wanted to be the nightmare owner, wasn't paying the property taxes. The seller was the county. Interesting. So the county normally forces collection of taxes, but they can't force us to pay all the taxes. They're the owner of the property. So they actually credit us all the property taxes, both halves. So we get the property, clear property taxes. That was like an extra couple $1,000. Then the other half of the owner thought he was going to be all tough. Well, we had an attorney all along that we negotiate what our cost would be. He contacts this guy and says, what do you want to do? Do you want to buy us out at fair market value? Do you want us to buy you out for market value? Or do you want to put on the market and sell it 50-50? And he started off with, I don't want to do anything. And Archie said, well, here's what we're going to do. And here's a copy of my petition action template. And here's what we're going to do. And he started negotiating with us. And next thing you know, we make a deal with the guy. So we have this $500,000 half interest in property that we bought for $315. And turns out there's a dwelling unit in the back that's getting rent. Front's rented. The half owner thought he'd force out the tenant and put his mom in it. Turns out he can't do that. So we're getting great market rents in these 2 units. So we have like a $500,000 property that we bought for $315, and we're getting good monthly income on it. And the property taxes are all paid by the county. So it all worked out. So to answer your question, I'd say that there's about one of those a month in LA County. And again, those are the problems that I look for to say, well, if that's a problem, if we solve it, how do we? And I'd look for somebody who wants to buy that property and is okay with the potential legalities of it. And in this case, we haven't filed a petition. Most recent one, I've done them before. We filed a petition, and there it's like anything else. You either file and they settle most of the time, or you go to court and the judge forces you to sell the property. Great, we're glad to do it.
It sounds as if there is some overlap because the it seems a little different, but the idea of buying the half is kind of an interesting point because in Florida, ex-husband can force the sale from ex-wife. It's a full lawsuit. You get a judgment. You can either then push it to a public auction where you can bid on it, investor can
Right.
bid on it.
Right.
But then the other part that I was kind of going over was like before you even get to all of that part, you looking at the ex-husband and saying you don't want to deal with the lawsuit, I'll take the quit claim off you.
Right.
Yeah. So something similar like that, but I think procedurally it sounds a little different.
So look, I think Mike Tyson once said, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the nose. Right.
Right.
So what I find in real estate is oftentimes my client will say, well, the other party won't do this. They won't do that. I say, no, no, no. They told you they won't. But once they're punched in the nose, it becomes a different game. And so I think everybody can say whatever they want, but when they get served by an attorney and they realize that, okay, well, if you don't want to sell, you're going to hire an attorney, you're going to answer this complaint, you're going to have to win, which odds are you're not going to win, but go find an attorney who'll tell you you win, write him a check. Once you write him a check, then you can tell me how tough you are. But until then, you're just in trouble and we're going to force to sell the property. And I just find, and again, I'm not doing that to be punitive or a bully. The truth is, they're trying to be a bully to the estate. They bullied the estate out of money. And my client is an investor who I think is bringing a property that otherwise is sitting in limbo to the market. We don't have enough houses in LA. So I don't feel guilty about it. And I'm polite. I'm giving you a shorthand language. The shorthand language of an attorney letter is a punch in the nose. And when people realize that now they have to go hire an attorney if they want to defend themselves or start being reasonable, my experience is 90% of clients will start being reasonable. Right?
Maybe.
We had a case at Probate where the 2 days before COVID shut us down, we're supposed to close escrow. The seller decides they're not going to let us walk through the property vacant. His friend's living in the house and he wants his friend to live there until the day of the close of escrow. And we say, well, we know your friend is. He needs to be out of there. We walk the property vacant and then we close escrow the next day. And because of and with COVID, we didn't want him stuck in the house. He'd still be there.
Right.
And so the seller, in my opinion, breached. They think we backed out of the deal. And so the seller, of course, they're probate. They have an attorney, right? By definition, in this case, they had an attorney in the probate. And so it went to my client. The buyer had to hire an attorney. But once my client hired an attorney and we filed breach of contract against them, now they have to write a check to get an attorney to represent them on a breach of contract cost. It's easy to be intransigent when it doesn't cost anything. But when you have to write a $5,000 or $10,000 check, all of a sudden and he got reasonable and we're closing this week. So I said 90% of the time, when you're reasonable and you have a good attorney lay out your strategy, and their choice is either fight you by hiring an attorney or not, most people get reasonable at that point, in my experience.
Well, I'm very curious what happens when you start testing the Miami market and what you find there.
Well, Miami is I lived in South Florida. Miami is a whole other ballgame. I remember writing checks, getting checks in Spanish when I lived in Miami. It's a whole nother world. Parts of Miami are like a third world country.
It's a big melting pot, tons of culture, and it's a totally different planet. It's almost like its own state down there because it's everything.
I'm an expert witness on a probate case here in LA, in eastern part of Los Angeles, and the father and son, there's a dispute with the state and the son, Cuban. He moved here instead of Miami. How that happened, I don't know. And the question is, did the father intend to give the property to the son without doing a proper grantee? Was that really his intention? And I can say, yeah, he's Cuban. That's what they do. Now, whether it's legal or not, that's the judge's job to determine if it meets the standards of the law. But damn well, some guy who moved here from Cuba, after the revolution, and started business here in LA in the food business, and he wanted to give it to his son, but he could avoid taxes by not transferring. And his son, he had the same name, and they don't use junior, senior. Yeah, that's what Cubans do. With all respect, they're wheeler, dealer, aggressive people. Like they move so quickly, you get dizzy talking to them.
It's a different world down there. I mean, there's no doubt about that.
It's like coffee, man. The little Cuban coffee things they drink.
Oh, they can make you buzz. I mean, they make you flutter away and do whatever you want to do.
Yeah, Cubans are
but I tell you, Bill, I mean, the whole point about all the partitions is that you'd be so surprised how many investors or how many agents don't even understand what that concept is.
No.
Or how that concept alone can help solve problems.
Right.
And you're educated enough to know what that is. And so it's so amazing hearing your experience from it.
I've often thought, can I make that into a big enough niche to really, really market to specifically, because there's enough of them where it's an issue. And I think there's solutions, and obviously negotiating is always the best solution. If you can avoid litigation, then that just solves all those problems. And if you could help educate people to understand, you're going to end up selling the property one way or the other. You can't force them not to sell property just because you're mad that your mother loved him more than you. It just, the law doesn't have room for that. So
right.
One thing I want to ask you about before we wrap up is quiet title.
Okay.
So here in LA, I've had occasions where there's some sort of an issue with the title that we would pursue a quiet title action, and it is ridiculously expensive. And the process is just ridiculous. It's just pure litigation. It's not like probate where there's a defined kind of timeline and process. It seems to me like it could just be a war. You're just going to file and avoid and file. And is that how it is in Florida, or what? Is that just my imagination?
No, I don't know if it's like war, but what I've realized with quiet title is it's not inexpensive and it's not cheap. Okay. And the whole point about it and timing of it is just, it could be 2 months. It could be 8 months. It could be 1 year. It all depends on who's on title. And the whole function of the quiet title lawsuit is to eventually get an order of final judgment. So that order of final judgment gets sent to the title insurance underwriter. Then they can go, ooh, you did everything we needed you to do. You served everybody on the title commitment. I think now we can issue a title policy for the buyer, because now that you have served everybody, it's going to be hard for the people that were served to come back with claims. And they had their moment to say what they needed to say, and they didn't come back. So it really is a function. I mean, the name itself speaks for itself. Quieting title, silencing people's interest that may or may not ever come back on the property. And it's just a procedure. It's almost like a foreclosure. It really is a foreclosure. That's why foreclosures could take a year, 2, 3 years. It's clearing things and interests. And I try explaining to people, sometimes it's not even about my attorney's fee. There ends up being a concept called costs. Costs are expenses, service of process, newspaper publication, things, opening the court file, things that are out of our control that we need to do in order to make sure procedurally the quiet title is effective and recognized by a title insurance underwriter. Sometimes when the people are deceased on title, we have to, well, actually, anytime in Florida somebody's deceased on title and a quiet title, we have to get a guardian ad litem, aka court-appointed skip tracer, to make sure that they can do their due diligence in finding people, notifying them, and almost represent their interest in a court proceeding and explain to the judge, nope, they look for them, we look for them, really didn't find any, nobody responded. And so there's just so many costs I've realized by doing these this year. For example, even on our end, if you can't find any heirs, if you can't find the people that need to be served, we have to hire, it's suggested, an independent company to do that searching for us. Right. I don't have time to, go on there and look this up. I'd rather get somebody that can do it for $340, but it adds up. I mean, the problem is it adds up, and looking for people. I got that question again today. during a meeting, and they said, how much, how long. It can go in so many directions.
Yeah,
Every case has to be evaluated.
yeah, that's right. And then evaluation costs money because anybody worth their salt is going to spend a couple hours and do some research and want to dig deeper. And if you're paying for that time, a couple $100 an hour, $400 an hour, $500 an hour, 2-3 hours work, you're into it for a couple thousand to see if you have a deal. If. Hey, I got to wrap up here because I
Sure.
have another call coming up. This is phenomenal, Al. Thank you. This is fun.
Thank you, Bill.
We
We're
need to
having so much fun. We could probably go for 2-3 hours on this.
We're gonna do it again, and we'll talk again. And I really appreciate your contribution to our probate community. I have friends across the country. I know you're in Florida. Real quick, if someone wanted to reach you, what's the best way if they wanted to contact you about a probate or probate related legal issues?
Find me on Facebook. It's under Al Nicolletti. Right now, the name that Facebook gave me is like al.nicoletti79. I have no idea why they titled that way. So if you have a problem finding me, you can look it under that name, but find me under Al Nicolletti. Also, check out my YouTube channel. It's at Al Nicolletti. I have videos on probate. It could be anything from tax deeds, quiet title. There's going to be more content. So if you watch a video, like it, share it. You can comment. We'd love to hear your experiences. You can call me at the office number if that worked for you too. It's 904-246-9994. Or you can just reach out to Bill and say, who was that guy on that show? I really need to get in touch with him. So Bill would tell you right then and there.
Be glad to. Well, look, again, thank you so much for your time. I'll put your links in the notes when we get this posted. Thank you so much for your time, Al. It's always a pleasure, and we'll catch up again soon, okay?
All right, Bill. That sounds great. We'll talk soon.
Thanks so much. Hold on a second. Oh, my mouse died. That's funny.